Welcome to Chat TPT, a podcast about music business from the unique perspective of content creators in the trumpet community. We are so excited to have you here with us today as we dive into the world of trumpet playing, content creation, and everything in between. We hope that you'll find a supportive and inclusive space with us where musicians from all backgrounds can learn, collaborate, and support one another.
It is bizarre.
In music, we're always told to present ourselves, and we always have to look good. I remember in undergrad, there was a kid, he was a grown-up. We're all grown-ups in undergrad. There was another student who, his only wardrobe basically was, sweatpants. And he just wore sweatpants every day. And, which is live your life, be comfortable, be casual, whatever. But one of the professors told him, pulled him aside and was like, hey, if you want to be taken seriously as a musician, you got to stop wearing sweatpants all the time. And it's what an odd thing to say to someone. First of all, you're in school. Kids nowadays, they show up in pajama pants. They're wearing their pajama pants out in public.
Yes. Yeah.
And so once someone made this comment to him, he just started wearing dress pants every single day. So, honestly, dress pants are kind of they're comfy enough. Sweatpants, jeans are probably the most uncomfortable pant on the planet.
Yeah.
And I don't know why people like them, because they're just so not comfortable. But it's it's all about your appearance. It's all about how you look. And I think that has a lot to do with, society's expectations of us and all of these things that we've been, trained to believe. And I think that this leads perfectly into our conversation about imposter syndrome. Oh yeah, I did that.
Nicely done. Beautiful segue.
Yes. Yes. Very proud
yeah, it
of
is
myself.
interesting. It is interesting, all of the things that all of the factors that come into play when it comes to presenting yourself as a human, as a musician, as a performer, as an actor. In some way, shape, or form, our audience does all of these things, right? There is an element of presentation on stage that is a part of the performance. And, it's something we can't get away from. It's just a matter of how seriously do you take it. I do want to add, before we start talking about our imposter syndrome talk, which this might actually be relevant in the future because it has to do with one of my former teachers who I admire very greatly for so many reasons. And I've mentioned before, the great Joey Tartell wears shorts to everything. Yeah, he does not wear even at his wedding. So yeah, there's an element of, presentation is a factor. Identity is also a part of the conversation. And I think it's been very common to train people to present themselves in a manner that is perceived as professional at the beginning of your career as you build your brand and your identity. And I can say there are definitely very important and crucial elements of that. If you're in a public school, for example, you should absolutely always be doing that because your students have dress codes. But if there's a specific brand that you're looking to build, for example, you and I both do social media platforms. If for some reason we both wanted to do something remarkable with our clothing, if we wanted to cosplay all of our performances, and then record them and put them on social media, that'd be an example of why you maybe wouldn't dress up and look quote unquote professional, right? So there's always exceptions depending on what you're looking on doing. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I think a lot of people know, I love watching or listening to the Open Bell podcast, and Bill Stoneman oftentimes at the beginning when they do their warming up segment, he usually says, well, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to mention that, which usually triggers Joey because he's like, well, by mentioning it, you're talking about it. And that's why he says it every week. But that's me. We're mentioning that side of things, but we're actually going to talk about imposter syndrome. I hope Joey's not listening or watching because we've just triggered him if we have. And maybe, well, yeah, we'll leave it at that.
I hope Joey is watching. I hope he's listening.
Now that we've said it, someone's going to send it to him and be like, hey, listen, look at what your former students said. Now that would just be, I don't know, is vindictive the right word? Seeking conflict.
Hey, we talked about it last time. Like controversial, it's all
Uh,
good.
sure. Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we're
But what do you
getting
want to
into
do? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
imposter syndrome. We were thinking because we are Chat TPT and we are all about this new technology of the youths, we are gonna give Chat GPT a prompt, and we're gonna talk about, you know, first of all, what imposter syndrome is. Um, people experience it in different ways. People can experience it in all walks of life, not only as musicians and performers. And then, sort of things that we can do to deal with imposter syndrome. So, why don't we first start off with our lovely friend, Chat GPT? We can ask them the definition of imposter syndrome, and then we can read it out in my beautiful narration voice.
I think we should start off with the fact that you said youths.
I'm trying to be hip. Marcus, I'm trying to be hip.
Uh-huh.
Also, I love how we were talking about wardrobe and stuff, and I'm sitting here in my Snuggie. Shout out to Jacoby Henry, my roommate from Illinois, who gave
Yeah.
me this Snuggie, and the most I have ever worn it is here in Los Angeles. Because let me tell you, they sell it. They're like, oh, LA is so pretty. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful. It's like lovely all the time. The apartments do not have heating. They do
Oh
not have
no.
heating.
That's
So
that's kind of a problem.
it is 60 degrees outside and it gets cold at night, and the apartment just like keeps the cold in, which is like great if it's hot outside, but it's cold outside anyway. So I've been
Yeah.
living in this Snuggie, and you'll see in all of our episodes that I'm filming, because we don't have heat, I either have this Snuggie on or I've got like multiple blankets wrapped around me because I am freezing.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. But
It's
I'm
okay.
also glad that you
I'm
have a
just
Snuggie.
complaining, honestly. Yeah. This Snuggie, honestly, Jacoby, shout out to Jacoby. It's super awesome. It like goes all the way to the floor, like all the way to my feet, so I can like just like curl up in it like a little ball. Maybe
Nice.
Snuggie will sponsor us.
That would be a good sponsor. Okay, all
Stay
right.
cozy while you watch Chat TPT.
Chat GPT gave us the we're busy message for like 5 minutes. So it took a while for me to get into the system. But we're here. We're here. Um, okay, cool. So I'm gonna share my screen as we type in the prompt. And correct me if I'm wrong. We would like to start with what is imposter syndrome? We are defining it before we then talk about how to navigate it through our music world. So we will go through that. You can see all of the stuff that I talked about last in 2023. Hold on, are there any silly things? Craft practice tips. I'm actually not sure what that one's about.
You say craft, and I just
Um,
think of Kraft peanut butter.
Craft. I was thinking of Kraft mac and cheese.
It's the same company,
Um,
isn't it?
I honestly don't know. I would assume so.
We could
Um,
ask ChatGPT that as well.
food
Side
food
note.
tutorial. Yeah, food tutorial YouTube RPM. That's the one. That's the best one. All right. Okay. Cool. So we're going to ask Chat GPT. Chat GPT. Oh my gosh, I did the same thing. We're in caps lock. That's what's happening.
Don't
Um,
yell.
we're gonna ask, yo.
You're blocking
I actually,
ChatGPT.
I actually, ironically, wasn't yelling because I held shift down and caps lock was on, so it was all lowercase except for the T in chat. I was like,
I see,
what's
I
going
see.
on here? Hi, Chat GPT. Can you define for us the the true meaning
The true meaning of friendship.
of friendship? Maybe for another time. The true meaning of imposter syndrome. Thanks in advance. You're the best.
Yours truly, Marcus Grant.
That's how I talk to people in general, because I do appreciate people for who they are. So we will treat Chat GPT the way that we treat humans, and hopefully it'll give us an answer that will help us as humans.
I like that.
Hello, thank you for your kind words. Imposter syndrome refers to an individual's persistent feelings of inadequacy, self-doubt, and the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of their competence, success, or accomplishments. Even that by itself is worth mentioning. Shall we read the rest for our non-YouTube audience?
Yes.
Okay.
People experiencing imposter syndrome often downplay their achievements and attribute their success to luck or external factors rather than acknowledging their own skills and abilities. I feel like we should switch back and forth, just like in school when like the teacher calls out different people to read like each sentence. I used to hate doing that.
Yes.
And now I basically
now we're just
talk for a living. So
it's because, that's another conversation, but now that it's not required, it becomes fun, right?
mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll switch sentence by sentence. This psychological phenomenon can affect individuals in various fields, such as work, academia, or creative pursuits.
Even when faced with tangible evidence of their accomplishments, those with imposter syndrome may struggle to internalize a sense of competence and may live in constant fear of being found out as not truly deserving of their achievements.
It's essential to recognize that imposter syndrome is a common experience and can impact individuals regardless of their actual competence or accomplishments.
Overcoming imposter syndrome often involves acknowledging one's achievements, setting realistic expectations, and developing a more positive and accurate self-perception.
All right. That is quite
ChatGPT like foreshadowed our next plan.
Yeah. And that is that is a thorough and very appropriate answer and way to go about talking about imposter syndrome. That's not just a Webster's dictionary definition. It's talking about the mental and psychological impacts that falling into imposter syndrome and getting out of imposter syndrome entail. Yeah. You have any? I want to start with your thoughts because we started with my thoughts on our last recorded episode. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. I am very familiar with imposter syndrome, so this is like hitting close to home. I think the biggest thing that stood out for me was just the fear of being exposed as a fraud, or not as good as or other people perceive you to be. And
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing that happens with performers, not only because we're constantly working on getting better. We always have this feeling that we're not good enough. Maybe some people have this feeling that they're good enough, and if so, I would love to know their secret. But we have this feeling that we're never going to be good enough. And then when it comes to our achievements, I feel like our society sort of looks down on us for celebrating the things that we are successful at. When someone is, talking about like, oh, I won this audition, or like I got this job, or this or that, other people are like, oh, they're bragging. They're full of themselves, and we don't want to be seen that way. So in a way, we are also contributing to our own imposter syndrome by not celebrating our successes. And it's just this vicious circle that keeps going around. And what we need to do, and what Marcus and I are doing, we are changing this narrative. We are changing the way people, interact with one another, the way we interact with ourselves. And Like you said, Marcus, what's your quote? What's your signature line for this podcast?
For life as a whole, rising waters lifts all ships.
Yes, and I mimed
I
the
love the I
action as
love the
well.
raising the roof action that we
Yep.
have.
But I think that that's super important. And if you have this internal monologue that you cannot share your accomplishments or your successes with, not even with the world, but with your friends, the people who you trust, then that's something that you have to look into. Or maybe you're just not surrounding yourself with people who are truly supportive of you, because someone who's really supportive of you is going to celebrate those achievements with you. They're not going to make you feel bad for sharing those things with them. So that's what I think is the problem with the world. So
Yeah. I have to agree on essentially everything that you've mentioned here. The the birthplace of imposter syndrome for a lot of people comes from a place of compassion and not wanting to invalidate anyone else's efforts, and also um, not wanting to put too big of a head on your shoulders. We've all heard of the saying, "The bigger they are, the harder they fall," and there's a lot of that focus on our society. We've had a sort of pendulum swing. We're sort of starting to go in the other direction, where it's like, okay, yeah, but it is necessary to acknowledge your own self-worth, and it is necessary and possible and should be encouraged to celebrate your successes. The really cool thing about, especially the music world as a whole, but anything that you know, any craft that directly involves the teamwork of other individuals as well as the service of individuals who are outside of the field, is that when you do well, it has an immediate positive impact on everyone else's well being. So it's not a bad thing, and there's nothing to feel guilty about to improve upon your craft and to do something that is worthy of success. And you absolutely should feel comfortable celebrating when you have improved upon something. You don't have to be perfect. There is no perfect in music, right? Music is comparable, and perfect by definition is beyond compare. So perfection is never going to happen. You never have to achieve that. So it's perfectly fine. But going through the process of acknowledging your own growth and your successes, it's what gives you perspective and keeps your head on your shoulders to understand what it is that you're doing well and how you can continue to improve upon that. A lot of the things that we do in the practice room are focused on our mistakes, especially if we are focusing, if we're in the beginning stages of truly learning how to practice. Hopefully, as you grow and develop as someone who works towards your craft, you're also able to equally acknowledge all of the things that you do well and to lean into them and to acknowledge that the better you do with something, it helps to augment your ability and increase your potential to do the things you aren't necessarily as good at, because all of our fundamentals tie together. The same thing is the case when you are growing and developing as a musician. If you are sitting next to, your biggest trumpet hero in a room and you're feeling intimidated, that's a natural response. But also understand that you're there for a reason, and whether you're sitting next to them as colleagues or whether you're sitting next to them as students or whatever the case may be, you share a common goal and a common desire. It's something you can relate in, and we all want you to succeed. We all want each other to succeed. So we're all on the same team. And there's no reason to feel like you are inadequate or never going to make it. So keep your chin up, and in most cases, if people are telling you that you are great at what you do, um, they have the outside perspective, which is less of a emotional, psychological, or distorted um, viewpoint. And so if you are thinking that you're terrible and everyone else is thinking that you're great, you want to default to what everyone else is saying, especially your mentors and your colleagues and other professionals that are out doing what they do, and other pre-professionals who are out doing what they do. So all of these things are just a part of things that circle around our minds as we deal with imposter syndrome. It is okay to be great at what you do. That was your goal from the beginning, right? When you pursue music for a living, especially for those of you guys who are currently out there pursuing music for a living. When you receive those successes, you deserve it. You've put the time forward. You have put a ton of passion towards it, and you've worked really, really hard to get there. And maybe somebody else is still working hard to get there, but they will get there as long as you guys continue to uplift each other and support each other. But in the meantime, don't be afraid to celebrate your successes and accept that you have achieved some of the goals that you're looking for, and then continue to move forward, because that's a part of life. We are always growing and developing and changing.
Yeah, I love all of that. And before we go and continue our venture into our little topic with Chat GPT, I want to talk a little bit more about changing the narrative because I've I've talked with a lot of people who have won auditions or, advanced in their careers, and I often feel that, especially maybe not our generation, but perhaps, the older generations, once they achieve something, they're like, well, it was so difficult for me to get here and people treated me this way, so I'm going to treat everybody else who's coming in the same way that I was treated. Whether it's like, just giving them the cold shoulder or being super judgmental or not, making them earn their place in the ensemble, even though they've already earned it. And I think that's a really big thing in like all areas of life, but we should want to make it easier for people coming into positions like ours. Like we know that we're like qualified for the job. You have the job, so you're qualified. So you should stop testing people once they've gotten the job. It's like hazing in college sports, you know? And I
Yeah.
just think that it's super important that if you're in a position to mentor and support someone that's coming in to a position like just like you were when you got that position, I think it's really important to support them and not make them feel small, not make them feel as though they are an imposter, because it works both ways. Like other people who are higher up would be like, well, it was way harder for me when I was there, and like they're not as good because like I did this or that. It's like it doesn't matter. We are we are where we are right now, and everybody has a different journey. Everyone has a different story, and you can't possibly know what other people are going through or what they have done to get to this point in their life, and you only see what's on the surface. So we need to support those successes that we see. That's what I'm going to say about that. Just
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really strong and powerful thing as well, right? Just because you had to struggle to get to a position doesn't mean it's your responsibility to help somebody else struggle to go through that position, right? They don't have to go through the same things you did, because we're all different people in a different time of life. Again, the world is growing and developing and changing. We are growing and developing and changing. And so it's never going to look the same from year to year, from month to month, or even from day to day. So yeah, we don't have to give anyone a rite of passage or anything like that. If they're there, they've put the work forward. Absolutely. And then if you are on the other side and you are someone who has had to go through a rite of passage of your own, and you start to feel your own sense of imposter syndrome as a result of those who are coming in. And perhaps whatever the case may be, maybe you feel intimidated or whatever the instance is. Just remember as well, you did the work necessary at the time that was appropriate for you to get where you are. You deserve to be there as well. So once again, we're all on the same team, and there's nothing stopping us from working together. We are stronger together.
all right.
Is it Chat GPT's turn?
It is time to ask Chat GPT. What was our next thing that we were going to say?
How to navigate?
Yeah, how to navigate,
Imposter
how to
syndrome?
deal with imposter syndrome.
Okay, we are still sharing, so we can see the tab. I'm going to read it out as well. I'm saying that's great information. Thanks to the previous prompt, and then we're going to say, can you please provide tips on how to navigate struggles with imposter syndrome. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
Okay. Let's see what our third host for this episode has to say on navigating tips on navigating struggles with imposter syndrome. This is probably going to be a list. Let's see what it is. It is in fact a list. Is it a 10 thing list? It's still going. Yes, it is 10. It is 10.
All right. Do we want to do
this is a big one.
Do we want to do the trading off, or maybe we should talk about each point as we talk about it?
Yeah, I think we should talk about each point. Just glancing at these are all really important, and I think maybe we need to give them all their due time. So we might turn this into. Are you okay with turning this into a 2-part podcast episode? Because if we go through all of these and talk about each one of them, it's probably going to be like 90 minutes or so.
Especially with our type of conversation, because
we talk
a lot, which is a symptom of performance anxiety.
Kayla just learned this today. She's like, have I been nervous all my life?
The answer is yes.
We are the Chat TPT podcast. There'd be no reason not to chat, right? About trumpet. That's what we're here doing. That's what we're here for. Okay, here's what Chat GPT says. Can I read the heading and then you read number 1 and I read number 2 and so on and so forth? You cool with that?
For sure. Let's go.
Okay. And then we'll go back and talk about each individual one. All right. It says, certainly, overcoming imposter syndrome can be a gradual process, but here are some tips that may help you navigate struggles with imposter syndrome.
Number 1, acknowledge and recognize. The first step is acknowledging that you're experiencing imposter syndrome. Recognize that these feelings are common and that many successful individuals have faced similar challenges.
Number 2, separate feelings from facts. Challenge negative thoughts by objectively evaluating your achievements and skills. Keep a record of your accomplishments and positive feedback to remind yourself of your capabilities.
Number 3, set realistic goals. Establish realistic expectations for yourself. Break down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable goals. Celebrate small victories and recognize your progress.
Number 4, listen to the Chat TPT podcast. No, that's not what it says. It says talk about it, but that's basically the same thing, right? Talk about it. Share your feelings with someone you trust, whether it's a mentor, friend, or colleague. Often discussing your thoughts with others can provide perspective and support.
This next one is a big one for me. Number 5 is learn to accept compliments. When someone praises your work, accept the compliment graciously. Avoid downplaying your achievements or contributing your success solely to external factors.
Yeah, that is a big one. I anticipate we're going to talk a lot about that one. Number 6, recognize perfectionism. Perfectionism is often linked to imposter syndrome. Understand that nobody is perfect, and making mistakes is a natural part of the learning process.
Number 7, embrace growth mindset. Cultivate a growth mindset by viewing challenges as opportunities for learning and growth. Understand that skills can be developed over time through effort and dedication.
Number 8, seek professional help. If imposter syndrome is significantly impacting your well-being or hindering your ability to function, consider seeking support from a mental health professional such as a therapist or a counselor.
Number 9, focus on self-care. Prioritize self-care to maintain your overall well-being. This includes getting enough rest, engaging in activities you enjoy, and practicing mindfulness or relaxation techniques.
And number 10, develop a support system. Surround yourself with a supportive network of friends, family, and colleagues who can offer encouragement and constructive feedback.
Remember, overcoming imposter syndrome is a journey, and progress may take time. Be patient with yourself and don't hesitate to seek help if needed.
That's a really good answer. Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like we've talked about a lot of these things, not in regards to imposter syndrome, but, when it comes to practicing or when it comes to,
Mm-hmm.
self care or mindset. And I think that Chat GPT really made a great list for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Shall we start at the top?
Yep, let's go.
The first step is admitting you have a problem.
I love that one too. The first step
um,
is admitting that you have a problem.
Acknowledging that you're experiencing, this is what Chat GPT says, their official answer again. The first step is acknowledging that you're experiencing imposter syndrome. Recognize that these feelings are common and that many successful individuals have faced similar challenges. Now, this by itself is a pretty powerful one, right? One, acknowledge that you're not alone, right? Individuals who are successful struggle with this. So if you struggle with it, it's a sign that you might also be among those individuals who is having a successful career. So it's something to make note of, right?
And I think this goes along with the talk about it point number 4.
Mm-hmm.
People who are experiencing imposter syndrome, at least, like people are more open about it now, but people wouldn't talk about their feelings of inadequacy,
Yeah.
any struggles that they're going through, because we have this desire to present a perfect picture to the world. So the more that we talk about what we're going through, what we're feeling, what we've experienced, the more we're breaking down this stigma of perfectionism, which is another point that ChatGPT lists. And this is like a big talking point that I had in my dissertation, which is now published, just
Nice.
about mental health and breaking down stigmas surrounding mental health issues
Yeah.
and perfectionism and all of that among musicians. So these all sort of like tie together, which I really like.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a podcast hosted by two content creators, we would be remiss if we don't mention the effects, especially that, social media of the past, the past decade or so, especially, if we look at 8, 9, 10 years ago, we saw, I think it's fair to say we saw even more so of this. Social media is inherently fake what you see in front of you, right? You usually see everyone's greatest hits, their accomplishments, and people want to share those things. You don't typically see people share when they're struggling. However, over the past couple of years, but especially over the past year or so, we're starting to see a lot more creators be real in front of their audience. We're starting to see vlogs of people showing and documenting their struggles and their triumphs, which makes them a lot more human, makes things a lot more relatable. And we've seen content that has started to show that we can triumph through our struggles, which is showing that struggles exist. Just understand, just a very tiny little, you know, almost a like just a handful, right, of the struggles that we really go through are struggles that you see that show up on social media that we're comfortable sharing with the world. So you still don't have the full picture when you look and see someone's successes and you compare their greatest hits again to your full self. It's going to be a lopsided comparison. So acknowledging and recognizing that you are experiencing imposter syndrome, and also recognizing that those happen among others, even those you see on social media, it's going to be a very important part to going back on the dehumanizing effect that imposter syndrome has on you, to realizing that no, what you're experiencing is in fact a part of being a natural human being, and that is a great thing.
I love that. The second point we have is separate feelings from facts. And as soon as we read through this description, I thought that it would be awesome if we got somebody who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy to maybe come on this podcast and we can chat. And I know just the person, Natalie Dungy, one of my good friends and trumpet players. She's currently doing her PhD, I think, in like psychology or therapy or whatever. So,
Yeah.
and she does a lot of stuff with cognitive behavioral therapy. And I think that that's a new type of therapy that's sort of just like coming out, and it would be really good to get someone else's input on how you can approach these things, because it's easy to say challenge your negative thoughts by objectively evaluating your achievements and skills. It's so hard to do something like that when you're in the moment. It's much
Yeah.
easier either to see it from an outside perspective. So like seeing how a friend is doing and be like, oh, I see this negative thing, but we can see the overall picture and it's, going to turn into a positive thing, or we can spin it in a positive way. But it's much harder to do it when it's ourself. So
Yeah.
understanding a little bit more about how CBT works and how we can apply it into our everyday life, just like starting really small. And we've talked a lot about like manifesting and affirmations and stuff like that. And I feel like this second point about separating the feelings from the facts
Mm-hmm.
sort of aligns with previous conversations that we've had.
Yeah, yeah. I would love to see what Natalie Dungy has to say about this topic. I think it's something that's very, very much needed, and whether that's an appearance on the podcast or just a chat that we can, shout her out on, or whatever the case may be, I think it'd be really helpful for our audience and community. I agree with you very, very much. It is much more difficult to do this type of thing than to just talk about it, right? It's very easy to say, oh yeah, when you have negative thoughts, challenge them, and just be objective. Being objective is really difficult when you are only literally seeing the world through your own eyes, right? You're being asked to step outside of your own, by nature, self-centric perspective, and trying to see all of the factors at play. And we can't always see all of the factors at play when we're the ones going through things. That doesn't mean it's not a possibility to live into, right? And so, like you were mentioning, a lot of these things tie together. These points that Chat GPT has given us. We're going to be talking about seeking professional help. We're going to be talking about developing a support system. We're going to be talking about learning to accept compliments. All of those things help us to find evidence of facts and to be able to separate them from feelings. They help us to be able to challenge our negative thoughts and things like that. But it's much easier said than done, right? This is a process that you want to continue to grow and develop a skill, just like you developed your skill, little by little, of perfecting the art of playing your instrument. And it's something that will take patience, but it's something that's worth working towards achieving, right?
Yeah. Well, do you want to read the
Yeah.
next one?
Yes, let's do it. Number 3 says, set realistic goals. Establish realistic expectations for yourself. Break down larger tasks into smaller, more manageable goals. Celebrate small victories and recognize your progress. This is a really big one for me. I think I've mentioned a lot of times, we've mentioned plenty of times in this podcast that we both teach private lessons, right? And I've mentioned a few times, but maybe not enough, that one of the really big rewards of teaching private lessons, it helps you to grow as an individual as well, right? We learn and get better at our craft as we teach, and it reminds us of certain perspectives that are necessary and appropriate for people of all ages, regardless of who you're teaching. And this whole aspect of establishing realistic expectations, it's a really big deal, right? The other thing I like to say a lot is every staircase is climbed the same way, and that's one step at a time, right? You have a 24-story skyscraper, or you have a 2-story house. Um, One is a little bit more intimidating to climb than the other, but what's not intimidating is, can you take the first step? Well, yeah, of course. Well, can you take the next step? Yes, of course. And so on and so forth, right? You don't have to, take over the world in a single night, right? You don't even ever have to take over the world, right? It's just a matter of going through a journey of progression, and that's something that's really important for us. When we set aside the smaller, manageable goals that add up to those larger tasks, it gives us the opportunity to show ourselves that we are improving, when otherwise it might be a little bit more difficult through a longer term goal to recognize if we are improving. So it allows us to keep a clearer perspective, and it makes it a lot easier for us to celebrate our progress. The only other thing I want to mention about this, when we were all kids, we grew, on a consistent and steady basis, right? And we were with ourselves all our lives, and our, immediate family, most of us in most cases are with us all our lives. Relatives or friends or and so on and so forth might see you once a month, once a year, once every couple of years. And one of the most common things you hear, right, is, oh my goodness, he's so big, she's so tall, they've grown so much, right? You don't notice this. You don't wake up, one day and go, oh wow, I was taller than I was yesterday. But it's through that added growth over time, it starts to become a lot more noticeable on a larger scale, right? So taking one step at a time is the most efficient and effective and best way to do what you are doing. And if you're doing it that way, then you deserve to be where you are. There's no reason to feel bad about that or to feel like you are not measuring up to anything or anyone as a result of that.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this with our, New Year's resolutions. Setting realistic goals is so important. I am a big list person, so I write down all of the things that I want to accomplish. And then I usually in the past, I have set unrealistic expectations where it's like, I'm gonna finish this whole list today. And then I finish 2 things and then I feel bad. So understanding, like, realistically, like, how long is it going to take you to do certain things? Whenever I have to do, like, phone calls or emails or, any sort of, like, computer work, busy work, stuff like that, I always, even applications, job applications, I know now that it is not going to take me 20 minutes. It might take me a few hours to get through all of that stuff. And just being honest with yourself about how long it takes you to do things. That's why I keep track of how long it takes me to warm up or get through certain things in my practice session, because if I have, let's say, 10 excerpts that I need to work on, and I'm going to work on, excerpts for 30 minutes out of my practice session, knowing sort of how long it's going to take me to practice like those specific things is super important. And realistically, maybe I'll do 5 minutes per excerpt, so it's it's going to be 50 minutes instead of 30 minutes, and then I won't be as frustrated with myself. So setting realistic goals is super important, which is why, like, planning your practice, which we talked about a little bit on our last recorded episode, is also a good thing to look into.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next one, my favorite one, the one that makes me the most uncomfortable, number 4, sorry, I've skipped ahead. Talk about it. It's so important to talk about these things and to, share everything with the people you trust. If you feel comfortable talking about it online, on the internet, that's fine too, but talking about it is really important because that's going to break down the stigmas that have built up surrounding, like, imposter syndrome and self-worth and all of those things.
Yeah, it can be really hard to be vulnerable sometimes, but when you do so, it opens up the opportunity to de-alienate yourself from the rest of the world and society, and in this case, the specific trumpet community or music community that you're in. You start to realize that these things that you're struggling with, we really aren't alone, right? And you don't have to struggle with them alone. You can relate to people, and you can unite. And as you continue to look to achieve your goals, you can have people who are cheering you on and supporting you, and you in turn can cheer them on and support them as well. Like we did mention on our last recorded podcast as well, there's something to be said about the power of community. Being in the right environment is arguably equally as important, if not more important, than the constant, steady, hard work that you put towards a craft. If everyone is trying to pull you down as you're pushing forward, you're going to have to work a lot harder than you would if everyone's trying to push you forward and we're all going in the same direction. So you can establish that type of environment by being honest and being vulnerable about the things that you're going through. And it's really helpful. I mean, Chat TPT says a mentor, a friend, or a colleague, right? If you don't feel comfortable talking to people who you feel you're on quote unquote equal footing with, then you can talk to a mentor and say, what do I do? How do I go through that process? They can help you. Or vice versa, if you feel too intimidated by someone you might consider a mentor and you want to talk to a friend or colleague, they're going to be able to help you to go through that process as well. They could be going through the exact same thing at the exact same time, and you could progress together as you continue to achieve your goals. Or they may have recently gone through it, and they can help. They can grab you by the hand and walk you through the process as well. But the important thing is to don't bottle up, right? Don't keep it inside of you. Talk about it. Share it with other people.
This next one is the one
And
that
then
makes
we
me
go to number 5. Yeah, I'll read it. So that'll make you feel less uncomfortable. It probably won't make you feel less uncomfortable. Number 5, learn to accept compliments. When someone praises your work, accept the compliment graciously. Avoid downplaying your achievements or attributing your success solely to external factors. This is very, very common among musicians, right? It's common among other types of crafts as well, but especially as musicians, right? We feel like we put our heart and soul on stage, and when it doesn't go the way that we want, it can be really frustrating sometimes. But that doesn't stop the fact that others, have been impacted in a positive way from your performance. And if they're coming up to recognize that and to confide in you about that, then it's something that is worth accepting. One, because it's a great, you want to acknowledge the fact that they had a great and positive experience. And that's, for most of us, is the goal that we're looking for, right? We want them to enjoy being there, spending their time and effort towards what we're doing. But then 2, it helps you to understand the broader perspective. Some of the things that were maybe disappointing to you might not have been as large a factor to your audience. And that can be something that's really comforting as long as you allow it to be. And that doesn't take away from the fact that you have noticed XYZ things that you want to take into the practice room and work towards. You should absolutely be able to do that. But when someone is celebrating your success, it is important to acknowledge that there's a reason behind that, and allow that to keep your perspective.
Yeah. So I have a very complicated relationship with compliments. Um, Most of the time, like growing up, especially when people would compliment me, I would just almost feel like embarrassed, like I just didn't want people to notice me. And then as as I've grown up, I try to compliment people because I want other people to feel good. And I feel like part of the reason why compliments are so uncomfortable for me is because like I like the compliments. Like I like being complimented. If somebody compliments me on my playing, I'm like, you get that like warm feeling inside. But I feel like society has once again told us that we shouldn't want to be complimented, or we shouldn't feel the need, to have to, you know, be complimented and stuff like. See, I'm all flustered already because I'm just like, bleh.
You're doing great.
But thank you. See,
See?
I accepted your compliment
Yeah,
graciously.
absolutely. Yeah, you did.
But yeah, like being complimented, it feels good, and I feel like society doesn't want us to feel good about ourselves. So that's why I try so much to compliment other people, especially like you want to give genuine compliments, obviously. Like you want them to come from the heart, come from a place of kindness. Um, because as Marcus said, the rising waters, what? Do it again.
Rising waters lift all ships. I love that you do the pushing, like you're pushing something off of your shoulders. I
Yeah.
like that. I
Pushing
like that
the weight
visualization.
of the weight of the world off of my shoulders. But yeah, learning to accept compliments and know that it's okay to feel good about yourself. I feel like so much of my upbringing or my experience as a musician has been like, I'm not allowed to feel good at myself because I will never be good enough, or because I'm not there yet. I can't accept this compliment. And then to spin it the other way around, if someone compliments you and you downplay it, let's say I've done this before, absolutely. After a performance, someone has come up to me and was like, wow, your multiple tonguing is just so good. And either to that person or maybe in the back of my head, I'd just be like, no, it was terrible. This is the worst that I've ever played it, like blah, blah, blah. Like that almost that's almost insulting to them because you're insulting them as a player. Because, like, if they think that you're doing so well and you're like, oh, that was awful, that was terrible, then you're kind of saying that, like, what they think is good is terrible. And then there's that whole other side of it where, you might actually make them feel bad, or they might feel bad about even complimenting you. And then you're just making it awkward for everybody to give compliments and receive compliments, and just take the compliment, okay? Just take it. Just accept it and be like, thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
keep your mouth shut.
It's a very tricky thing, right? There's so many aspects that come to this, right? When you accept a compliment, you validate someone's emotions and perspective, and so it's never accepting compliments is not always about you, right? It doesn't just benefit you, but it benefits other people to be able to unite around what it is that they find value in. It's a very powerful thing. It's a form of service, right? And that's what service is about, right? When you give someone something that is of value, it makes you feel good. It's putting goodwill out into the world benefits both the giver and the receiver. So for the receiver to reject it, you are then rejecting the ability to have that goodwill spread out into the world. And so that action by itself stops people from wanting to do good out in the world. And obviously I mean, we will never have enough good in the world. Even if the world was entirely 100% all good, there's still no reason why we would want that to stop happening, right? And certainly there are some ups and downs about life, and there are some ups and downs about how we view ourselves, whether it's from a performance standpoint or a day-to-day standpoint, whatever the case may be, whatever you're going through. But when somebody acknowledges that they find value in something that you have done or something that you are experiencing together, it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit them to accept that and to be gracious about it and thankful for it. And if it feels appropriate to, and if it's in a instance where it's necessary, to reciprocate that as well. Now, I will also mention, just in full transparency, this is a very common thing that a lot of people struggle with, right? I am not exempt from struggling with it as well. It is a very difficult thing to accept compliments. Again, it's a process that we're all going through. So I don't want you guys to think like, oh, Kayla is terrible at it and Marcus has perfected it. That is absolutely not true. It's very difficult to go through that type of a thing. The last public performance I have given at the time of this recording, I was in a I was in a situation where I was very sick, and I I went to do the performance. I wasn't contagious or anything, right? But it was a deal. It was a deal where it was very difficult for me to stay nourished and hydrated. And I went and I did a performance in front of an audience, and I felt really dizzy, and I could barely even, keep myself on my feet, let alone evaluate my own performance. So psychologically, I felt like I was doing a terrible job and that everyone was going to hate me and that I should have stayed off stage, right? However, when I left stage, I got so many great compliments and kind feedback. And, I had people come up to me and say that it was like a life-changing experience for them, which is something that, I, to me, it was a very scary, and I thought that I was, uh, proving my own fraud type of deal, right? Like someone's going to be like, this guy calls himself a professional, but the exact opposite ended up happening. And I will tell you, I did have the opportunity to embrace the positive feedback, and it did make me feel better. And of course, being able to share in their positive experiences is a good feeling as well, and it helps to reshape and reframe how we approach what we do. Doing what we do as musicians is, there's a very strong community aspect to it, and so whereas in a lot of businesses and fields, you don't ever necessarily need validation. And we are, of course, taught in society that if you seek validation too far to an extent, it can be very dangerous and toxic. And that's absolutely true. But there's an element of our craft, or any craft, that is focused on entertainment in any way, shape, or form, that you do need to serve your audience in such a way that they have a positive, meaningful experience. And the best way to know that is to allow them to give you that validation that you gave them what they were seeking and what they were looking for. So it's something we can all work with together. I would go as far as to even say, if you guys have comments or commentary about stories where you have gone through the process of learning to accept compliments, we would love to know, right, Kayla? We want to hear your stories.
I want to hear all of them. I love stories.
Yeah.
And before we finish, I think this is a great spot to end this half of our topic on imposter syndrome. But
part one of imposter syndrome.
This morning I was scrolling on Instagram, as one does. I love to doom scroll. I'm an avid doom scroller, and I came across this audio that was like, just a reminder, it costs $0 to be nice. And then the cheeky person is like, well, what does it cost to be mean? And it's like, it's $0, isn't it? They go back and forth. But honestly, when you are mean to somebody, it might make you feel better in the moment because you're pushing someone else down, but it's only going to add to your own insecurities about yourself, because when you're mean to somebody else, it's really just a reflection of how you're feeling about yourself. So in the end, being mean is going to cost you that, where being nice, you're going to make the other person feel good and you're going to make you feel good. And everyone's just going to be happy. And we want everyone to be happy and everyone to be nice and everyone to feel good. And that is what I want for the world.
Absolutely. That is a wonderful and noble thing to want with the world. And I have to say that I agree. I subscribe to your newsletter of kindness. This is something that we should absolutely be promoting out into the world. Yeah, that is a great place to put a cap on this. We have 5 through 10 to talk about in part 2. We thank you guys for watching, and we hope to see you then.
Don't forget to stay up to date with us on social media. You can find us on YouTube at Chat TPT, and individually on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Threads at TPT Solo and at MS Grant Music. We love hearing from you and staying connected with our amazing music community. If you enjoyed today's episode and found it valuable, please consider sharing it with your fellow trumpet players and music enthusiasts. Your support helps us grow and reach even more people. Please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. It would mean the world to us. Your reviews help others discover our show, and we're always eager to hear your feedback. Thanks for tuning in and being part of the Chat TPT family. We'll be back soon with more inspiring conversations and valuable insights. Until next time, keep playing those beautiful notes and stay connected.